And I can really relate to how hard it is to get into this red chair, right? It's the after-school shuffle into homework, coming in from work, after-school activities. And so the fact that you're already sitting here is such an incredible sign of your engagement and how much you care, and also how important family life is to you. So I really want to commend you and say thank you for coming out tonight. I also want to thank Marlon for bringing me. You first reached out to me at the end of last school year, so we've been working together all summer and into the fall to bring the best possible program that we could to all the students today. And I interacted with so many wonderful, wonderful students. How many parents have a child here today in the school here? Okay, great. So I was with 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade throughout the day. And there's also an administrator roundtable and also an kind of open office hours for all of the educators. And now to be here with you, and then tomorrow to be able to have a follow-up workshop where we can really talk about specifics and kind of play off some of the material that we talk about tonight. It's just such a gift for those of you that do have children here. Your children are really, you know this already because you've enrolled them, but they're in really good hands. The work that was done by the educators to prepare for my visit was incredible. The students at all levels were really ready to dig in and dial into the material because they've been prepped and they've had these conversations. The time they took, I sent kind of a little info survey, and the students and admin that took the time to give me that information so that I could be as prepared as I could be and hear the things that are on their hearts and on their minds, and really the level of care that went into the listening and the engagement that happened here with your students. And we had a lot of fun too. Sometimes coming up with this topic can feel like, oh, I'm going to hear all of the things that I'm doing wrong. This is totally dreadful. It can be a little bit overwhelming for all of us. And so I want you to know that I come at this from a perspective of I love technology. I use it in my professional life all the time. Actually, my entire career right now was built because of the internet. My academic background was in communications and media, but as a mother of 5 children, it didn't really take shape until I was actually parenting the technology. So my kids right now are age 8, 10, 12, 14, and 16. Actually, he's turning 17 this week. So this is an old picture because their outfits match the slide, so I chose it. So there's that practicality going on here, but this is about 3 years ago. So when I tell you that I get it, that I really understand what it's like to parent in the digital age, that I really am living it along with you, and also that I understand that there's a lot we can be celebrating. There's a lot of exciting things, but then also that there are some challenges that go with it, and that each child is unique, just like they're unique in their appetites, they're unique in their behaviors and personalities. The way that they interact with technology is going to be unique as well. And so coming from it, we need to think about our child and their tendencies as an individual, and then also as part of the family system and part of a greater community. And so how I got shifted to do this work specifically, I actually live on Cape Cod, so this was a lovely trip for me to make, nice and easy. And I had been working with youth and families and seeing that technology was really becoming the center of a lot of conversations I was having. So even if I was working with parents of young children, doing a workshop, say, taking care of yourself while you care for others, somehow we looped back to technology. Right? This was maybe about 5 years ago. Or if I was running a summer program for teen empowerment, showing up in these conversations were ideas and thoughts about social media or texting, or the very beginning stages of what we've now come to have really normalized and part of our everyday lives. And then, of course, in my own house, the youth is starting to increase in the want. And so when my oldest was 13, actually right around this picture, of course, he was in 7th grade and wanted his own smartphone. And so when my husband and I decided to go ahead and give him a smartphone for Christmas, I decided to write an 18-point contract to go with it for him. Nothing says Merry Christmas like a smartphone and a contract from your mom. But essentially what it was for me was an opportunity to vet some of my thoughts and fears, some of my beliefs about the technology, and to really be reflective. And so that contract has really become a cornerstone of our family system because it's a point we return to. Certainly it's shifted and changed throughout the years as he's become a user, or the other kids have now come of age, if you will, for their own device. But that it becomes this foundational piece. And so when I also write for the Huffington Post, and in 2012, that was the Christmas my son got it, I decided, based on the feedback I was getting from my own website, that perhaps some of the readers on the Huffington Post would like to see the contract too. But I didn't go directly to putting it on my blog. I reached out to my editor first, and I was like, I don't really know if you have any use for this. I don't know if this would appeal to a mass audience 4 years later. And so, but it's yours if you want to use it. And she wrote back to me, I hope you're ready, hang on. Which was really interesting to me. So that, the contract started, Dear Gregory, you are a good and responsible boy, and you deserve this gift. And it went on to say, failure to comply with the points outlined here will result in the termination of your iPhone ownership. Point number 1 being, it's my phone, I bought it, I paid for it, I am loaning it to you, aren't I the greatest? So it really just gets better from there. And, but in that contract were certainly reflective points, but also, things that feel important to us as a family. So of course it was times I wanted him to turn it off at night, kind of that tech curfew perspective, but also reminding him that, what you say over this device has to represent you. It isn't a different person. Really addressing some of those character issues that felt so important. And so after it went live on the Huffington Post, overnight it went viral, and Good Morning America was in my kitchen the next morning interviewing my son and I about it. And from there, really, my sister got married on New Year's Eve, so only a week later, reporters followed us to Boston, and while we were going to the wedding, we're trying to get interviews from us, and I was able to get a regular spot on NPR talking about digital parenting, and iRules came to life, and since then I haven't stopped talking about this. And I've had the great, great privilege of working with so many fabulous researchers, so many pediatricians, people in the tech industry, developers, people doing this work and creating the material that our kids are engaging with, thousands of parents, thousands of educators and students. And so know that tonight, what I offer to you is not going to be one size fits all. It is not that. What it really is an opportunity for you to reflect on what you want from technology, certainly, but what you want from family life. It's an opportunity to think about different perspectives. I feel like adding many voices to my one voice and my experience has been the most critical bit of my work, because interacting with young people and asking them questions have given me perspective as an adult with a fully formed brain I would not have had otherwise. Right? For most of us, we grew up without portable technology, and we made it to adulthood without portable technology. So essentially, we're all sitting here as trailblazers. Right? There's nobody ahead of us saying, how was this done? What is the best practice? When did my mom allow me to go on Instagram? Right? We're coming up with that as we go. So certainly there's growing pains. Certainly we're going to stumble in that space. Certainly we're going to need each other more than ever. And we're going to need to really be firm in what feels important to us and revisit that idea. So look at this tonight as an opportunity not to hear what you must do and what you must not do, but really as an opportunity for you to kind of hold up that mirror and say, what do I want to do and what feels right for me? And so to dig into some of this a little more is, in my opinion, the goal of the modern person is to have a healthy relationship to technology, to use it mindfully in our homes, in our professions, right? And to use it with purpose, but we don't just know how to do this, right? It takes practice finding this balance. And often, a lot of us we can feel drowned in that term balance, because everybody, eat balance, like exercise, like work-life balance, we're kind of overwhelmed by that. So balance is always shifting and changing. I'm sure you're thinking, just when I figure out one social media, something else comes on the scene, like Musical.ly shows up or something. Or just when I allow them to play a few apps, now they're asking for another one. And so it's ever-changing. And so that level of engagement, again, is so critical that we're doing the foundational work. So how many people here are parenting a child ages 0 to 5? Okay, how about 6, 7, 8? How about 9, 10? 11 to 13? 14 to 17? And how about on the adult side of things? Awesome. So this is great. This is really exciting when we have just, essentially baby to adult in one room, because I've just been such a believer in the wisdom that we all have, and the ability to teach each other is so critical. That we have shared experiences and we have unique perspectives. So when we kind of open up the conversation tonight, know that I welcome all of you to share at your comfort level your offerings for success or some of the challenges that you've had, because we're stronger. The more offerings we have, the stronger it makes us. So this is not a one-way conversation. And also, we are being videoed to share, but during the formal Q&A portion, we'll shut that off, just because sometimes personal things come up, specific stories about our kids, something we might not want to be replayed. So know that we'll have an opportunity to shift that too when we have that conversation. And so let's dig into some of the material here. I feel like digital parenting has everything to do with foundation. So that firm foundation, before we can talk about how much screen time, before we can talk about privacy settings or when to allow social media or what games are safe, which are all the questions we want, right? Those surface level questions that this is a problem today that I need to solve, which I respect and I understand. But before we can even do that, we need to peel way back. We need to come and address some of these issues around the foundation, right? So the foundational teaching. So right off the bat, we have to know our values. As a family, right? We have to know what we stand for. What feels important to us. What do we want to stand up for? And for all of us, that might be different, right? I know how busy life can be. I know how challenging it can be to be reflective at all in the modern day family. But I also know how critical it is. So activities like, for anyone who's ever read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, and certainly his take on 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families, is such a great read in this space around foundational values, because he talks about making a family mission statement and coming together and really creating that, co-creating that, really with the people helping us raise our kids and even our children themselves, and really asking, what is important? What is our mission? Right? We have that in the workplace. We have that in our school systems. And it's really important to know what's guiding us. What are our cornerstones in our household? Because the technology might change, something new might come along, but what stays the same is those foundational values. Those are the things our kids can depend on. Those are the ways when we say, do I want to allow that video game? We can say, is this aligned? Is this mission aligned with who we are, who we want to be, and where we want to go? So again, this part can be, again, ongoing. We need to stop and pause and reassess, and that's okay too. This isn't a set and forget kind of idea. This is something that might evolve and change, just like the technology might, in terms of needs, right? What's working and what isn't? That's a big question we want to be asking ourselves in this space, right? What's working and what isn't? Where might we need to shift? How might we need to come back to this? And knowing what we want to protect. So if I had to kind of answer this as a survey question, like, what do you want to protect your child? Certainly you'll say safety. I want my child to be a safe user of the internet. I want my child to be smart about what they post or what information they give away. And certainly all of that is really valuable and important. But then also, what other spaces do we want to protect in the family system? So we think about this as their social emotional health, their physical health and well-being, times as a family together. So where can we set up some boundaries? Where can we set up a system so that there is some space from the technology? So that there is some time where all of us, adults included, can have that break, that natural part of what we're trying to do here is encourage this as a family culture in the system. So maybe it's dinner time, right? Maybe device-free dinners is something you can adopt. Or maybe you're already doing that. Maybe you can offer up, maybe car rides are device-free. Or maybe car rides are the only time you use devices, right? Again, you're going to see how we can invert a lot of these discussions, but thinking about protecting playtime. So many of your children that I worked with today, I really reminded them and encouraged them to remember that their job, aside from being a student and a learner and being curious, is to be a child, and the work of a child is to play. right? So making friends, problem solving, and free play, not just play for the sake of exercise, right? Which we know that there's certainly plenty of fabulous options in terms of organized activities, but also getting out and running around and making up the game and picking the teams, and how critical that is, and so much research supports that the brain really thrives when it has the opportunity to play like that. And you're also lucky to be in a school that has 2 recesses a day, correct? Yeah, and that's really a space for that kind of free play. That's really nurtured, so it's part of your school culture already. It's something the kids have here already, and making sure that that's a space that we want to think about. Are we getting enough of that? Are our kids getting outside, sunlight, those kinds of things? Also, another space that, again, for you to reflect on is sleep. That a lot of the children, even the really young kids today, were saying that sometimes their technology can make them go to bed later, or make it harder for them to go to bed, or they're thinking about it when they're going to bed, which we can relate to, right? Did somebody like my post? Is my plan still alive? Whatever on my little game. One of I think she was a 6th grader today, said, I'm afraid when I put my device away for the night that I'm going to have FOMO, meaning fear of missing out. And so I thought, wow, maybe she feels like she's going to miss out that somebody else is doing an activity without her. But in fact, what she actually meant is fear of missing out on some of the conversations that go on online. So that was another time for me. I was like, oh, I see what you mean. You mean that if you put your phone away at all, things might unfold that you're not a part of. Or something might happen on social media that you didn't get to witness. And so to us, this feels like really funny, right? This is different. But to them, it's so part of their lives. It's so real for them. And so I think it's our job to really look at the way the technology is in their lives and seeing how important it is to them, especially that middle school age, and how so much happens for them there. So that doesn't mean we still don't want to protect them, we still don't want to set up boundaries for them, but it does mean that we can acknowledge how hard it might be to give that up, or how hard it might be for them to be consistent. And when we think about our adolescents and when we think about our young children, they're saying all the right things, right? The feedback I was getting from them, you have obviously done the work, the school here has obviously done the work, they know the answers, right? They know be appropriate, be kind, don't get addicted. This is some of the feedback they're giving me today. They know don't search crazy things. Also said that right. Search specific things. So they're getting that kind of digital citizenship education and that support from you, which is great. But also they're saying, I want to do those things, but I need help. Right? So they need that kind of parent modeling, that parent mentorship, and that parent guidance to go along with what they know to be good and to be true for them, that there is an end to their day. I actually recommend this for all of us because we've kind of normalized this idea that one day just goes into the next, right? That there's no start and stop anymore. There's no sense of completion to our day, to our work day. And so for a child, when we were growing up, if we went home after school, we didn't necessarily bring 300 classmates home with us over social media, right? So thinking about how that must feel to always be on, right? To always be engaged that way. And so that it really is going to be such a gift to our kids if we can give them some time to be off. Give them some time to be just exactly where they are. And in addition to that, really going a step further and thinking about just the science to go with that. Right? Some of the pediatricians I work with, I say, I have this unique opportunity to get in front of parents on a really regular basis. If I could say one thing on your behalf as a pediatrician in doing this work and doing this research around the digital world, what would I say? Before I can even finish the question, they say sleep. Sleep. Please make sure that their kids are going to bed and getting consistent and uninterrupted sleep. And then when I ask educators that same question, they say the same thing. that they can, especially at the high school and junior high level, that they can really tell when a child has unlimited access to technology at night because of their concentration, because of their focus, because of their mood. So again, really flipping the script on this and not seeing these things as punishment, not seeing having tech rules or what I call eye rules as a punishment, but actually as support. Our job as parents is to support our kids in this space, and these are things that are going to help them feel good, make better decisions, help brain development, help their body grow stronger, all of these things. So again, we might uniquely want to protect different things. And some people might just say, like, I really want to protect childhood. So I'm going to vet the apps that they play. I'm going to really say that they can't go on social media until a certain age. Or I really want to understand this better. I want to understand the technology, which comes to the next point, which is becoming digitally literate. So often I'll hear from parents that their children are more savvy on the technology than they are. And so what I want to remind you is that your children, regardless of how savvy, and many, many children are, and that's a gift in and of itself, right? That's privilege, that's an advantage, but they are still beginners. That developmentally they are still beginners, even if they've been on social media for 1 or 2 years now, even if they've been able to text since they were 8 years old, that they still developmentally need support and need that guidance. And so we have to understand it. So before we say yes to something, right, we want to understand what it is and how it works. We want to have a sense of who they'll be interacting with. Whether it's the game that they might be interacting with peers on, or maybe it's texting, or maybe it's social media. But just like we would ask that, or our parents would ask of us, who will you be, where are you going when you're growing up? We want to have that same sense of where our kids will be and who they'll be with online. Right? We want to have that same presence, and it does make a child feel good. It makes a child feel safe, to have boundaries, to have a parent who has this kind of knowledge, right, who understands it, and not just understands what it actually does, but why a child might actually want to use it. So when in doubt, I always need a conversation with, tell me more. I did this with your kids today. They would say, I don't want to get hacked. Something like this. And I said, tell me what you're worried about. And so it's, tell me more. Right? Where is that coming from? Where did you hear that? Have you had an experience like that? So getting curious is a critical part of this. So not just understanding it, but understanding how our children will interact with it. And another great resource is Common Sense Media, which is great for kind of giving us these digestible, on everything from movie ratings to, I'm sure you're familiar with it, but anything. A new social media comes out, a new app comes out. It kind of gives you a sense, or at least a starting point for what age is appropriate, and it really gets you thinking. Online, there are so many resources, tutorials on like how does Snapchat work, or what is Musical.ly, and they're quick, so we can have an understanding for it. I was working with some parents over the summer, and they didn't realize that Musical.ly was a social network, that the videos their kids were making could be shared. So what they saw was, my child wants to go make music videos with a friend. We all did dancing in our bedrooms or whatever, and that's what that was, but not realizing that it was reaching other people. So again, we want to have that digital literacy and that digital fluency on our own, because it's just going to help us make better decisions. It's actually going to help these other two things make these decisions above. And then we have to bring back process. I'm standing right in front of the slide for you. We have to bring back process to this idea. Just because we can give all the technology in the world, just because we can say yes, doesn't necessarily mean that we should. So with this, we really need to know our child. We really need to know how they're going to interact with their tendencies. I'm sure for anyone who has a child who likes to game, you aren't wondering, is my child a gamer? Right? You know that about that child. Or if you have a YouTuber or a child that really loves watching YouTube videos, which is something all the kids were very excited about telling me how much they loved it. You understand how much they love that, and you know that might be somewhere where you need to really dial in and set these boundaries, because otherwise it might cause a point of struggle. We don't want to introduce so much to our kids that we're adding struggle to our lives. Right? We want to set our kids up to feel successful. They absolutely want to do right by us. They absolutely want to make us happy. They have deep respect for us. So how can we help them have the success that makes them feel good, that makes us feel good? And part of that is process. Part of that is not too much too soon. Right? If you offer them the iPad with, let's say, 50 different apps, it's the equivalent of offering them dessert with 50 choices. That's a really hard thing for a child to make a decision about. And so thinking about, okay, so maybe we start small. Maybe we start with 3 apps I feel really confident about for them to choose from. Or when my daughter, who's a 7th grader, wanted desperately to be on Instagram, and she's a new user to it this year, that we started with a dozen friends who had been to our house. That was our starting point. Because I knew these children, I knew their moms, and that was, and as she got more confident as a user, and as she was having success, we could add more. You know, she could say, oh, could I add everybody from my soccer team? Right? And we could go from there. And also, for Instagram iRules, contract is also on my website, so you can see how I started, when they started on social media, how I really worked with them as beginners, and some of the things we talked about too, so that's just another reference for you. It's called Instagram iRules for Beginners. And then also thinking about process, like the whole process of learning to drive, which was such a great teaching point for me, because my son has just turned 17 this week, so he has gone through in the past year driver's ed, and he has gone through, you know, he has to do 40 million driving hours, and then you could, in Massachusetts, you have like your junior operator license before you can drive your friends. And I'm thinking, wow, we spend a lot of time teaching 16-year-olds safety and process. You have to sit down in a class, you know, all these things. But technology is very similar to that, right? Just like teaching our kids to cook. If you think about what you do, if you're standing with your toddler, you know, you might let them measure the flour and toss that in, or stand up next to you and get the stool. Then at some point they might, you know, be able to read that recipe card aloud to you. Or they might, when they reach a certain age, start to chop the vegetables for the soup, right? But what we don't do is we don't say, at just any given day, here are some pots and pans, here's a recipe, here are some ingredients, be careful, sometimes the stove gets hot. Right? We wouldn't be setting them up for success in that regard. That would be really overwhelming. They'd have to kind of figure that out on their own. And so thinking about the technology in a frame of mind that's process, and the other key message I really want our kids to have is that they have a choice in how they use the technology. Just because 5 or 6 social medias exist doesn't mean they need to be on there. Just because people want to follow them doesn't mean they have to accept everyone. So bringing back that sense of empowerment, that sense of agency in our kids and in our own homes, and what we model too, that we sometimes say no to things, that we say this is no longer working for me. That we remember that we have a choice, and that we're telling our kids that they can take a break if they need it. Often they feel like once they sign up for an account, there's no going back. Right? We can always reset, we can always step away. Because that's part of the process, that's how we learn and grow. Okay, so we all want to get to this idea of digital health, right? How do we use it best? And so iRules is just a working set of boundaries. It's essentially the contract that I built. It's essentially looking at those things. What are our values? What do we want to protect here? What feels important to us? What do we know about the technology we're going to use, and how can we make this a process? So coming together, and we can even sit down with our kids. You know, it's really great to engage them. Like I said today, your kids are so reasonable. When you ask them what is fair, right? What is reasonable? What is fair in this rule? They'll really say something reasonable and fair. So much so that I'm often really shocked that they're not trying to push it a little more. And so even today when I was asking them some of the tech rules or iRules that they currently do have at home, they were sharing a lot of great rules. So I know that a lot of you are doing this already. This already exists in your house. And so they're familiar with it. And they were saying, you know, but sometimes it's hard to do those things, right? So it's the action that becomes the challenge. Coming up with the contract, coming up with the rules is essentially the easy part. It's the enforcement and letting that contract be a living and breathing agreement. Something that's discussed and revisited Like, that's where the action is. That's where the work takes place. And that we can always come back and reassess. We can always come back and rethink. And then we need connection. So I used to just have, communication and community, and that was it on this slide. But we cannot have communication and community without connection. We need to be able to talk about things with our kids, and that doesn't come from just automatic. That comes from building connection time and time again. How do we build connection? Well, today we talked about being an askable adult, right? What does it mean to be an askable adult? So an askable adult is an adult in our lives, in the life of a young person, that cares about us, that helps take care of us, and that we can go to when we have questions, or go to when we make a mistake, or go to when we're unsure, or we're confused, or we can't tell if something's real or not, or we can't tell if somebody was being mean to us, or our feelings got hurt. And the kids really shared in that their parents were their askable adults, that they're teachers, but then on the flip side of that, how hard it is to admit to those people that we love and trust and respect so much that perhaps we've made a mistake. Or we do need help after all. And that comes from connection. That comes from when a child does come to us, that even if we don't like it, what they have to say, that they know that we can handle it. Right? That's where the connection is. There might be a consequence. But knowing at any age that we can handle it, that we can take a deep breath if we need to, that we might feel overwhelmed, but we are there, and that's not changing. And for those of us who can't be the askable adult for whatever reason, it is our obligation to direct our children to somebody who can be. And that takes practice. We have to take small steps. One family I worked with privately, the child was 12 years old and kept wanting to go to the mom, but the mom was working or busy, and the child just didn't feel like there was that opportunity. So when I worked with the family together, they decided to come up with a zone in their house that was the askable adult zone, or a device-free zone. So when the child said, "Can you step in," and the chair is what they called it, right? It was a special chair they went to where they sat, device-free, and they talked without judgment, or they shared some concerns or problems or things that might be on their mind. So again, none of this is to say you have to be perfect, you have to be engaged every single minute, you can never miss something. Right? We have to be really gentle with ourselves. We're parenting in an age where we're consuming a lot of information. We're trying so hard to get it right, so hard to get it perfect. And we really do have to just do the best that we can. And where we can start is just with that connection. What is it like to be you today? Right? Tell me something. Tell me something. This is one of my favorite questions. Tell me something about your day that I might not know by looking at you or looking in your backpack. It's amazing what comes up when we give them a framework with which to talk about it. Because how many of us have been like, "How was today? Fine. What'd you do? Nothing. Did you learn anything new? No." So again, that's where that connection can happen. And building those trusted relationships over time. And when we start that when they're really young, we start those spaces, it gets easier when those conversations do get a little harder, or those risks do get a little greater, which is developmentally appropriate that those things will happen. But that we know that they have us. We're in their corner, and that's a really critical piece of this. Because if we say, "Oh, you want an Instagram account? Can you tell me why?" If that doesn't feel comfortable, we're going to have to take a few steps back. Right? If we haven't set ourselves up to be able to have some of these conversations, the tell me more conversations, then we need more practice. Developing these skills absolutely is not something that's automatic. Parenting and being part of a family can be natural, right? It can come easily, but it's part natural. And a lot of it can be learned and practiced, and we can get better at it, without question. And then, of course, we need to be talking. We need to be engaged, and not just in our own homes. Sometimes we're parenting in two places. So there's that component to consider. That there might be two sets of rules. There might be a caregiver after school, or a grandparent that's doing a lot of the work. So we want to be engaging all the people who have that kind of stake in helping us raise our kids, And also community, just exactly, the boarding school is so great at doing this, is that bringing people together like this, so we, number one, don't feel alone, we can build relationships, we can lean on each other. Both of these things have connection in them. So that we can say, wait, is your child texting friends? Do they have their own device? When did you get this? Because we need each other in this space. And I call all of this the slow tech living, right? So slow tech doesn't mean no tech. It doesn't mean a bad connection. It means using technology mindfully and with purpose, right? It's this idea of digital mindfulness and using it with intention. So the why. How is this going to make our lives better? Why do we want it in our lives? And this just doesn't apply to kids, right? This applies to the whole family. Thinking about how we can integrate being a slow tech professional. So many of us are so connected all of the time, like we talked about, that we're seeing workplace culture really shift, or start to shift. Of course, it started in Europe, and it's coming here. But this idea that, if everything is urgent, then nothing is urgent. Right? And we're rethinking how often we communicate. And we're thinking, how many emails do I need to send it? How many people do I need to CC on that? And will I ever feel a sense of completion? Will this ever be done? And giving ourselves, I have a colleague actually that lives in Hartford, and he calls it mental obesity. His name is David Polgar, right? That we're all taking in so much content, so much information, so many conversations in the course of the day, that we owe it to ourselves. Not just owe it to ourselves, that it's scientifically better for us to give ourselves a break so we can come back to our work restored, so we can get a good night's sleep, so that we can engage in hobbies and this kind of connection and relationships and all those other things that are important to us, and even for problem solving and for creativity. That some time away from that constant connectedness is really important. So thinking about that, when we think about using it with purpose, is there a time of day where we can take a break? Is there a time of day that we can turn off? And that becomes modeling. So I have no interest in shaming anyone, but I do want you to know that when I asked your kids, are there some rules that you would like your parents to follow? I was not setting you up for success, but it's curious to me. I just like to hear, what does an 8-year-old, what are their perspectives? And it's so interesting to me that again and again, regardless of the school district I'm in, regardless of socioeconomics, culture, religion, where I am on planet Earth, I've had the great fortune of being in a lot of places, interacting with a lot of different people. And when I ask children that question, they say, look up. See me. Be present. Don't get addicted. Finish your work. Come play. And these things are essentially what we're telling them. So that mindfulness around what we're modeling and how the technology is in our lives, and that we are working very hard at our personal and professional lives. We are maintaining relationships. But just considering that. Considering that whether they just want to roast us, and tattle on us, but still that's their perspective. Still that's what they're seeing. And that's on their minds. And I'll share one last story before we open it up to questions about how really slow tech living came into my own life. When I shared with you the story about how the contract went viral and really my professional career changed from regional to international, which we did not anticipate as a household. And I had 3 months to write iRules in 80,000 words, so I was pretty heads down with the deadline. And I was aware of that, and when I sent the book off to its final edits, I was so relieved. Such a great personal accomplishment. I really understood that I needed to reconnect with my family. I really was going to go out on a speaking tour talking about connected families, and then I needed to make sure I was one, and that all those relationships and everyone understood our family was about to experience some changes with my travel would increase and all of this. And so I decided as a celebration of the book being done that the 7 of us were going to go to Disney World. And this is not something that our family had been able to do ever, the 7 of us, for a variety of different reasons. And also, at this point in time, my oldest then was going into his freshman year of high school. My youngest had just started being a full-day student. I could feel that it was shifting on us. I could feel that the time was about to start going very fast. And so I wanted this kind of, this fun. Right? We're very serious. We read a lot, we do all these things, and I just wanted to go have fun with them. And so I decided we were going to be device-free and Disney, because, of course, it had to be like part human social experiment, too. And so, these lucky children. And so we had this family meeting that we were going to, all adults were going to be device-free, and the kids were going to be device-free, and we were just going to be so intentional with our trip and so present. And my oldest is grumbling, like, Mom, I'm not that bad. I'll leave it in the hotel, just look at it at night. And, we kind of had to go around and around about some of these conversations. And my daughters were like, wait, weren't iPads invented for airports? We just go together. And isn't that when we get to use it, absolutely freely and all this? And, and I had my own discomfort. We had to share with my in-laws and my own parents and the grandparents, like, that we won't be connected, and they were like, how could you do this to us? And so even the generation ahead of us was really uncomfortable. They were saying, we want to see pictures of the kids. We want to see pictures of the kids, doing whatever, reading the characters. And I was like, oh, you know what? They have professional photographers, like, throughout the park. We'll show you next week. That was absolutely unsatisfactory. They wanted to watch the kids do their thing in real time, We're all pretty used to having that experience of, let's see it while it's happening. And so it was a lesson in patience for everyone. And actually, people said we can't do it. And people were asking, like, what's my point? What am I trying to prove? I did end up doing an NPR story about it. But anyway, I wanted to have that feeling of being really away, right? Because I hadn't had that in a while, and my husband hadn't had that. And I wanted to make sure the kids were reconnected with that sense of really being away for more than just a couple of hours to see what that felt like. And so, of course, there was that physical habit, right, that we had to talk about it. So we would verbalize whenever we felt the urge to kind of reach for our phone. I mean, how many of us are scroll for no reason? We have a few minutes in the doctor's office, or we're waiting for our Uber or whatever, and we're just scrolling. So that physical habit is absolutely part of our lives. And so we're in the airport like, oh, I would totally reach for my phone right now. Or, oh, do we really have to play another game of Go Fish or something like this? And it was like time travel. We had to print our airline tickets, and we had to have the numbers of things in case it didn't go the way it was planned, getting to the hotel and all this. And so once we broke the physical habit, it kind of felt good. I'm not sure if anyone's ever done like a digital detox or a break, but after those first 24 hours or 2 days, we start to feel like human again, And actually, side note, this is something that teenagers I talk to all over the world are craving. When I ask them some of their favorite times, they'll say, oh, when we go to the ski lodge in Vermont and there's no service. Or when we go to our house and we're not allowed to bring our devices. That actually they don't see it as a punishment. They see it as a reward for themselves, but also because they get the attention of the people they're traveling with. They're adults, and they know that everybody's kind of doing that challenge together. So considering that as you plan just time, some families I know do a 24-hour tech break every single week for everybody, and talking about how that shifts the family culture. And so as we're having this experience, I started to think about, wow, if we did bring our devices, you're bringing work with you, whether you like it or not, right? You're bringing relatives with you. You're bringing your neighbor being like, I think that a package got delivered. You want me to bring it in for you? And you're bringing your child's 300 classmates along with you. Because we know, like, one picture gets shared, and then it's kind of a slippery slope. And so one of the first mornings we were there, we went to the character breakfast, where you can meet the characters. And at this time, my oldest is kind of, he can kind of ham it up with the character. I knew he'd be fine. He's like classic big brother. And I knew my 3 little girls were at the perfect age to meet the characters. They had their autograph books out. This was something they were really looking forward to. But my 12-year-old son had a look of dread. And he just really was, can we just eat and get out? Do we have to do this? Can't we just go straight to the park? And so he's a little more introverted. He's my special guy, but I knew this is not his favorite thing. But we're doing it. Here we are, right? And so the characters start to make their way to the table, and I can't really do anything. Before I know it, Stitch from the movie Lilo and Stitch has approached our table, and Stitch goes to Brendan, my son that I was referencing, first. So he can't even warm up. He can't even exit to the bathroom. He just has to sit there and own it. And I have nothing to document it on. I have to just sit and watch what happens. And so what happens is Stitch comes and he puts his hand on Brendan, and Brendan stands up. And he turns and he wraps his arms around Stitch. And honestly, it was like a slow moment of time. And I look, and then Brendan squeezes in against Stitch, and he stays there. And I look at my husband, and he's doing the same thing I am, like, nobody move. Because this is just such a beautiful moment of innocence, of childhood, right? It was so, when I reflected on that moment, it was so poignant for me because I don't know that I've had a moment like that since. Right now he's 14 and a half. Things have changed, he's kind of crossed over. But it was such a moment of purity and such a moment I was so grateful to witness, so grateful to be fully present for. And I know that if I had my device, I would have been trying to capture it. Knowing I'm trying to capture it, I don't know if he would have done it. I don't know if he would have been so himself. And then I know I totally would have ruined the moment by saying, do that really cute thing again so I can get a better picture. Talk about taking our kids out of mindfulness, out of the moment. And so what I thought at that moment was, no, we can't always travel and be device-free like this. And yes, there's times we have to be practical. But really what it left me with is, where can I find this in my everyday? Right? Where can I get those moments that are deliberate? Whether it's 10 minutes, whether it's a meal, whether it's a car ride. For myself, as an individual, for myself as part of a relationship with my husband, inevitably, I do a talk like this, and people come up and say, my kids are fine, it's my partner that this is going on for, right? So it's a relational conversation too. And then absolutely, how can I do this as part of a family, a part of the system? How can I give my full attention? And when I do, how can we all be present? How can we all be there? And practicing that has really changed how I set up my work, how I set up my time of day, how I set up the choices that I make around technology, the habits that I'm forming. And so again, the action isn't for you to go do this kind of vacation and run away and put all your devices away. What it really is where can this show up in your life? Because it's these small changes, and this is what we talked about with the kids today, that each of us has a responsibility as a user of technology to show up in a way that works for us, that feels good for us, in a way that we're proud of, in a way that feels healthy. And this is our family choice. And as leaders, you're all leading your families. You're all sitting here tonight. You get to help direct that ship. You get to restore or empower yourself to bring that agency to it, to have these conversations, and to lead. And so it's the foundations, building that connection, having a working set of boundaries, right, that we can reference, that reflects our family, and then bringing that slow tech idea, that intentional idea, that digital mindfulness, can really set us up to actually love the internet. Right? I mean, that's the goal, that technology is not going anywhere, that it's absolutely here to stay. It's going to be part of our lives. It's going to be part of our children's academic lives and their professional lives, and definitely their personal lives, and they want it that way. And so thinking about all of these things together is really going to help us not resent it. It's really going to help us get to know it, and really going to help us thrive in this space. Thank you. And I'd love to hear your feedback, your questions, your concerns, anything at all. And know that tomorrow we'll have an opportunity to workshop some of these ideas. Workshop, how do we get to build a contract? What are some question prompts we can ask? A little more technical around this, where tonight I really wanted you to have that opportunity to reflect.